Midnight screening. Maggie was a night owl, often finding solace in the quiet hours when the world was asleep. One particularly restless night, she decided to browse through her collection of old DVDs, hoping to find something that could lull her into sleep. After a few minutes of indecision, her fingers settled on a plain, unmarked disc tucked away in the corner of her collection. She didn't remember buying it, but curiosity got the better of her. She inserted the disc into the player and settled into her favorite armchair, the remote clutched in her hand. The screen flickered to life, displaying a grainy title card, The Midnight Life. Intrigued, she pressed play. The movie began with an aerial view of a familiar-looking city. Maggie recognized the landmarks immediately. It was her hometown. The camera slowly panned down to a quaint neighborhood, focusing on a single house, her house. A chill ran down her spine as she watched, the feeling of deja vu growing stronger. The film followed the daily life of a woman named Margaret, who went by Maggie, just like her. The actress looked remarkably similar, and as the story unfolded, it became clear that this Maggie shared not just her appearance, but her life story. The uncanny resemblance left Maggie on edge, her heart pounding in her chest. The scenes played out like a documentary, capturing mundane yet intimate moments. Maggie at work, Maggie with friends, Maggie alone in her thoughts. Every detail was spot on, from her favorite cafe to the way she twirled her hair when she was deep in thought. It was as if someone had been watching her every move and transposed it onto the screen. As the movie progressed, it took a darker turn. It showed Maggie receiving a phone call late at night, the voice on the other end telling her to go to the park. She remembered that night vividly. She had ignored the call, thinking it was a prank. In the movie, however, this Maggie decided to go, curiosity overpowering her caution. The screen showed Maggie walking through the deserted park, the moon casting eerie shadows on the ground. She reached a secluded spot where a figure emerged from the darkness. The camera never showed the figure's face, but Maggie could feel the menace emanating from the screen. The scene cut abruptly to Maggie's house, now filled with police officers. Her body was discovered in the park the next morning, her life brutally taken by an unknown assailant. The camera zoomed in on her lifeless face, her eyes wide open, frozen in terror. Maggie's heart raced, her breath coming in shallow gasps. She felt a sudden, overwhelming urge to turn off the movie, but she was paralyzed with fear. The screen went black for a moment before flickering back to life. This time, it showed a different scene, her living room, right now. The camera was positioned behind her, capturing her every move as she watched the film. She could see herself on the screen, sitting in the same armchair, her face pale and eyes wide with fear. Maggie turned around, expecting to see a camera or some trick, but there was nothing there. The room was empty, save for her. She faced the screen again, her reflection still staring back at her. Suddenly, the reflection smiled, a cold, sinister grin that didn't match her own expression. The lights in her living room flickered, and she felt an icy hand grip her shoulder. "Hello, Maggie," a voice whispered in her ear. She spun around, but the room was still empty. Panic surged through her, and she bolted from the chair, the remote falling from her hand and clattering to the floor. The movie continued to play, the reflection now standing up and walking towards the camera. Desperate to escape, Maggie ran to the front door, but it wouldn't budge. She tried the windows, but they were sealed shut. The house that once felt like a sanctuary now felt like a prison. The air grew colder, and the voice whispered again, "You can't leave, Maggie. This is where you belong." She turned back to the television, and her reflection was now standing right in front of the camera, staring directly at her. The room around her began to distort, the walls closing in, the shadows lengthening. She felt a suffocating pressure on her chest, as if the house itself was alive and conspiring against her. The last thing she saw before darkness consumed her was her reflection reaching out from the screen, its cold hand merging with her own, pulling her into the void. When the police arrived the next morning, they found the house empty. Maggie was nowhere to be found, and the only clue was a plain, unmarked DVD still playing in the living room. The screen flickered, showing a loop of Maggie's empty chair, the shadows in the room seeming to whisper her name. Maggie had vanished without a trace, becoming another ghost in the celluloid, trapped forever in the midnight screening of her own life.